Alright, so here we are in the lobby of this courtyard by Marriott.
Yep.
And so here we are. This is actually quite comfortable. You can just, sit back, relax. Also, you can be over there like we were. You can watch the TV. Currently playing the PGA Masters this year. Super excited to see who wins. Alright, now, as we are in Houston today, I think it's going to be quite apt to discuss all about Houston.
Yeah.
The stats and its history and all the famous places that you can see when you come to Houston. So let's take a look.
Alright.
So, Houston, it's the most populous city in Texas and the fourth most populous in the United States with a population of 2.3 million people, which, that's a lot of people.
Definitely.
So, Houston is obviously not the only city in this area that has quite a lot of population. There's the area around it. So let's take a look at the greater Houston metropolitan area as a whole, which is the second largest metropolitan area in Texas. The first one being Dallas-Fort Worth.
That's really interesting. But let's also look at the area, in which case Houston would be the 9th largest city in area in the entire United States, which is an achievement. But another achievement that it also has is being the most diverse metropolitan area in Texas.
That is actually quite cool. I like that. So let's take a look more at the history of this city and how it came to be. And this all starts back in 1836. And at this point, there is the team of two brothers. You have Augustus Chapman Allen and you have John Kirby Allen. And so the Allen brothers are actually investors who are looking for ways to expand, and they decide that they're going to try and create a new city. It's the 1830s, so cities are one of the best ways to do it. This is when the expansion of the United States was in full force, so it made sense at the time. And so that's what they did. They found this place, which is near the Buffalo and White Oak Bayous, and they realized that this area would actually be quite suitable for a city. So they decided this is where we're going to do it, and so they named this city Houston, and lo and behold, this city was born. And to this day, the birthplace of the city of Houston, that location, the confluence of the Buffalo and White Oak Bayous, is known as Allen's Landing, after the Allen brothers who co-founded this city.
Interesting. Houston as a name was named after Sam Houston, General Sam Houston, who was the 7th governor of Texas, as well as the president of the Republic of Texas.
That's right. In the 1840s, this was before the American Civil War. This was when General Santa Anna of Mexico was defeated by General Sam Houston, who managed to make Texas an independent country. Yep, that's correct, it was, for quite a few years until the United States and Texas basically just merged. America annexed Texas, and ever since then, Texas has been American. And so over time, Houston continued to grow and grow. And for a brief period of time, Houston was considered the capital of Texas, while a new capital was on the search. Eventually, they found Austin, which is the capital to this day of Texas. So aside from that, Houston started keep going up and up and up. And actually, during the Civil War, it did actually play a unique role during the Battle of Galveston. Galveston is the nearby port city here. It's also quite big, and it's a major part of the greater Houston area. And so Galveston, there was a big battle there, the Battle of Galveston, and the Confederate forces who were pro-slavery actually based some of their storage and made it here in Houston because it's right nearby. But in the end, the Union forces, anti-slavery, eventually won the whole war, and, that is what happened at the end of that war. But Houston did play a pretty interesting role in the Battle of Galveston. And so, over time, aside from that, as I said, Houston is just going up until the year 1900. And in 1900, there is a Category 4 hurricane that just sweeps out the city of Galveston. Again, it's that big port city. It was basically part of the Port of Houston, one of the busiest in the world. And at that time, Galveston was it. and then that hurricane came, swept off practically everything, and it has been reported that 8,000 people died as a result. It was massive.
That's sad.
As a result, that means that there was a construction to build a project that would help save this area from anything worse. And that became the currently undefeated Galveston Seawall. This seawall has never collapsed since it was first built, and there have been multiple extensions to help safeguard this area from any hurricanes.
That is a good thing that they did right there.
Yeah, that is very good.
Yeah. But after the city of Houston rebuilt itself, it got right back on its feet after it discovered an oil reserve that started up the Texan oil dome.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. Oil and gas are basically at that point they became some of the most important parts of the Houston economy and Texas overall. And so oil and gas remain a vital part of the economy, especially here in Houston. That's why ConocoPhillips, Phillips 66, and Occidental Petroleum are just some of the many petroleum and oil companies that are headquartered right here in Houston.
Yep,
So
Texas itself is pretty well known for its oil thing, and that all started.
yeah, so oil, it's a pretty important part of the Texan economy. So, as time goes on, we pass by World War I and World War II, and you just keep going and finding new interesting things that have happened. And, Houston is an absolutely wonderful city. So, as oil is just basically one of the driving forces lifting up Texas and Houston in turn, there is a new thing that has come out. In the 1960s, the very first ever domed stadium is unveiled to the public. It's called the Astro Dome, and this is a revolutionary thing. Until this point, every stadium that has been built has your classic stadium look, and then you have the staggered audience seating, and that was it. But then again, Houston is in Texas, and you know how Texas works. Hot summer temperatures are insane, ridiculously
I
high.
can imagine it would be hard to be sitting in that stadium for a long period of time whenever
Yeah.
it's that hot.
And plus, the athletes who are already sweating from the sport they're in, and now they have to deal with this too, ridiculous. So, the plan here was to actually build a dome over it, creating an indoor stadium. So that way everything can be cooled and everyone is happy. And so this was the plan, and they successfully built it, and that was a new revolution. And not just that, because the grass there, the grass, most stadiums work on grass or turf. So this grass or this turf, it's kind of meh because indoor, right? So how do you solve this problem? You want your grass to work normally for those games that are played on grass. So what do? And this is what they did. They invented something called astroturf. And this is one of the most well-known things that has come out of the Astrodome. Basically, this is artificial turf that looks a lot like actual grass. It feels like a lot like grass, and it works really well. And so it's a lot like actually playing on a grass field, like it should be. But now, this is artificial grass, so it's just going to stay there. It won't do anything, it won't just wilt out. It's not going to die because there's no sun. This is artificial turf, and it worked perfectly. That's the other major invention that came out of the Astrodome. But then again, over time, these inventions began to be used commonly by a lot of stadiums. The Mercedes-Benz Superdome is another big dome stadium. That's out in New Orleans, Louisiana. But then again, things started getting better. We had better technology, and the Astrodome became more unused. Now, no one really plays in it anymore, and instead it's replaced by Minute Maid Park and NRG Stadium, which are two pretty big ones that have replaced this so far.
But just because the Astrodome is unused doesn't mean that it's ever going to go away. After all, it's listed in the National Register of Historic Places, which means that, at least for now, it won't be going anywhere.
That's absolutely correct. Now, there are a lot of different locations and places to see here in Texas. And so I'd like to take a look at a few more. For example, there are institutions like the Texas Medical Center, which is actually the largest medical complex district. In fact, it is a literal district of medical institutions. This is the largest one of those in the whole world, which is like mind-blowing to think about. A whole district of this place is literally devoted to the medical industry. It's also got a whole neighborhood revolving around there. If you live within that area, chances are you're definitely a member of the medical industry. So that is the Texas Medical Center, gigantic place. And then here's one that we have actually been to before, and this was back in 2017 when we went here to Houston. And one of these places was the Space Center Houston, NASA's Johnson Space Center, which is where the Mission Control Center is. Every single human spaceflight mission you've seen NASA take, they are the people who do it. They are the people who control everything. The Mission Control Center, live from Johnson Space Center right here in Houston, Texas. It's super awesome, and we all really enjoyed going there. It was fantastic. Here are some of the things to see there. There is the Space Vehicle Mock-Up Facility, which basically has mock-ups of all the space stations and also every major module on the ISS. It's used for astronaut training. Then you have the Mission Control Center. That's the place where all the spaceflight missions are controlled from. And then you have your Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. And this is basically, if you've ever seen those pools where they have the astronauts go under.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. They use it to simulate microgravity out in space on the ISS or space shuttle, and they use that in order to get a sense of how microgravity works and how to deal with it.
That's super interesting.
It is a really, really interesting thing. We personally enjoyed it a lot, and I'd recommend you should go there the next time you come into Houston. And finally, after all of this, you have the actual bit that most people, when they visit the area, are going to see. That's Space Center Houston. That is literally just the bit sat there that's visible to the public, and you can go in there. There's a lot of different cool exhibits for you to see. It's absolutely fantastic. And so that's what the Johnson Space Center is. And now you're wondering, what's the namesake? Who is this named after? Who's the Johnson? Well, that's President Lyndon B. Johnson, who is a Texas native. And he actually served as the representative for the 10th Congressional District of Texas, which at that time was the area from northwestern Houston all the way out to Austin. So he is a very Houston guy. So naturally, they're going to name the Space Center after Lyndon B. Johnson. So that's the Space Center, which is really one of my favorite parts of Houston. Super awesome.
That's really cool. Another thing that is really interesting about Houston is that it is home to the second largest amount of Fortune 500 company headquarters. And the first one naturally belongs to New York City.
That's absolutely correct. There are a lot of companies based here in Houston. You have Phillips 66, which is the oil company I mentioned earlier. It's the largest oil company based here in Houston. As well as this, you have the American division of BP, British Petroleum. And aside from oil, you have Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which is the technology company that split from HP back in like 2014 or 2013. And also you have Cisco, not the technology, not the telecommunications company Cisco, CISCO. I'm talking about the wholesale company Cisco, SYSCO. You might have seen their trucks passing by. They're a super large wholesale company, and so they're also headquartered right here in Houston. So there are a lot of places based right here in Houston, and that is honestly really, really cool.
Yeah.
So, after all of this, here is one last thing that we're going to talk about Houston, and that is the nicknames. Yeah! Now, let's talk about the nicknames. The first one is Bayou City, and it's named Bayou City because the city was founded on the confluence of two bayous. As mentioned earlier, they are Buffalo and White Oak, and the Allen brothers founded the city on that confluence. And that's where it all started. That point now known as Allen's Landing after those brothers. Next, we have Space City, which, well, that makes sense. It's obvious. Johnson Space Center, NASA, it's a major part of this city, and so naturally, Space City is an apt name. Next, you have the 713, which is 713 is the area code of Houston on the phone numbers. So if you see something from 713, that's Houston. And the last one is H-Town, which is, well, it's Houston Town. So H-Town right here, Houston Town, that's the last nickname given to Houston. And that wraps up this video all about Houston. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Akash.
I'm Amrita.
And we'll see you next time.